So this is what the Meet Echo's got for your slides. I don't know if there's a...
It looks correct.
Yeah, but Pavel just literally in the last 5 minutes decided he wanted to change your slide, so... Cool, okay.
I don't think we've touched our slides since that.
Okay.
Did you? Oh, that was the last 5 minutes.
I found the typo.
Yeah.
Okay. On your head, Ian.
So I think we're at 2:30, so we'll start the meeting. So welcome everyone. I am your co-chair Gavin, in the flesh this time, and next to me is Marco, and we're here to make this meeting work and be successful. So welcome. So firstly, remember that this is a proceeding of the IETF and needs to be need to follow the rules in the note well. So please pay attention to this. I'm sure you've probably seen it a few times in the last week, but it's still important and everyone has to pay attention. And also, please also make a special note of the kind of conduct that the IETF asks its participants to follow in terms of being constructive and cordial and having good conversations. So these are all very important things. We'll talk a little bit, let's move on to the next slide just to talk about the signing in to the meeting tool. There's a way to do it. There's a QR code at the back there. Everyone who is participating in this meeting needs to do that so that we have a record of your involvement. So please go ahead and do that. Next step is just to briefly give you an overview of the agenda. I should also mention, by the way, our beautiful logo, which is making its debut at this meeting. Thank you to Pavel for creating that. So as a working group, we now have this logo and you'll see it on every slide. We will have a quick overview of kind of operational matters for the working group that Marco will lead. And then we'll get into the meat of the meeting. We have some reports back from activity happening elsewhere that will be presented to us. And then we're going to spend quite a lot of time working on the requirements document. So we're going to dedicate an hour of time to work on the requirements document, and hopefully we'll have time permitting to for Christian to present on topic of representing DNS data in RPP. And then hopefully that will give us time to wrap up, and then we'll all be done and we can all go home or go to the bar or wherever we feel free we want to go. We would like to ask people if they can to provide notes, contribute to the notes. We've kind of filled out a pro forma, so please, all you have to do is go in, put your name in the list of note takers and add comments. Anything that's relevant that will need to be remembered going forwards should go into those notes. So please do that. And so with that, I will hand over to Marco to talk a little bit about working group operations. Marco.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, just a very quick update. For those of you who were there, perhaps you remember that last time I talked a little bit about the tools that this group is intending to use for their work. The most important one being GitHub. We have used GitHub ever since that last meeting. And so we use it as working group chairs to prepare for the meeting, and we also use it for authors and editors to work on adopted drafts and perhaps even some other stuff. The brief conclusion is it works well for us. Perhaps you remember last time there were some concerns, conflicting concerns actually. Some participants were worried that the mailing list would be overloaded with messages from GitHub, and others were concerned that they would miss out on important discussions that were taking place on GitHub. So we thought about that a little bit, and what we came up with was some sort of a middle ground. So as you have seen, if you are subscribed to the mailing list, is that we send out a weekly digest every Sunday evening on what's going on on GitHub. That's an automated tool provided by IETF. And we also created a dedicated GitHub account. And if you mention that account in issues, only then the mailing list will also be informed. And the idea of that is that you can tag that special account if you think that a certain issue is really relevant for the mailing list to become aware of. So that's the way of working. We believe it works for us, so we intend to continue it until further notice. And that's basically it, what I had to say about this slide. The other stuff, the mailing list and the wiki is just, it works as intended. Thank you.
I noticed we have someone in the queue. Tom, do you have a question you want to ask about? Okay, thank you. All right. So I will just briefly recap and remind everyone of our planned milestones and deliverables for this working group. This is not set in stone and can be changed. And everyone loves the sound of deadlines as they push past. But we aim to have consent. So apologies, I didn't realize I was talking to nothing. We aim to have consensus on the requirements for this for RPP by the next meeting in Montreal. Hence why we're spending so much time talking about it today. And once we have that consensus on those requirements, then we can proceed to working solely on the core architecture and specifications, and with an aim to complete delivery of both of those by February of 2027, at the same time as which we're delivering the mapping between RPP and EPP. So if anyone has any comments or concerns about those milestones, obviously you still have some amount of time, but these things can take a while. Then we have time to make amendments, but just bear those deadlines in mind when it comes to prioritizing the work that we're doing in this working group. So with that, all done. What we'll do is we'll hand over to the first speaker, who is where have my agenda? Evidently it's Pavel. So. You
want to give the clicker?
Yeah. Clicker, please. Yeah.
Oh, it's a bit unstable. All right, so I will give you a short update about the hackathon, what happened during the weekend. So we had quite a big round of participants from registries and registrars. So we actually had some work done. I won't be talking about this RPP. I think everyone in the room knows that already. But what was the goal? It was the prototyping of the core draft and the elements of this draft, and also the experimentation with the draft that Christian will be presenting later. And generally, we are talking a lot about modeling of URLs of data and all the other drafts which we have in the working group adopted, or let's say in the discussion. So last time we also presented what kind of models we see for RPP. So we are happy to see two of these models right now being in the hackathon. So one being the native model, where RPP will natively talk to the registry backend. So Denik team was actually working on this end and managed to let's say prove that like RPP can be plugged into the existing system. Also, FNIC was doing it on the testbed in registry implementation. On the other end, we had several projects doing like proxy to EPP. So Martin was working on the proxy plugged into SIDN system, and also I think to nominate system it managed to work. When we have the RPP testbed project, which we started last time in Bangkok right now. So this one is connected to an open source APP server, and Q was working on EPP proxy, which was connected to Identity Digital system. So in the end, it was quite a good success. So we had 5 working implementations, and of course, not each of them were full on scope. but all of them were working end to end. 3 were connected to real systems. We aligned the URL structures between the different proposals. We identified we have quite a different views still on the data representation. We discussed a lot how to represent the authorization code in RPP, and we have a proposal about it. And also we have the text to the draft about the program detail usage in RPP. So this, if you want to see some APIs and what we worked on, so we have actually from 2 data representation and proposals, we have the open API specification, which we actually publish over GitHub pages, so everyone can take a look and see how it feels. I think this is also important to let's say have approachable documentation. And actually some of the teams implementing during the hackathon were using this documentation, not really the draft, because the drafts are a bit lagging behind. We've spent a lot of time about modeling stuff in OpenAPI, and we'll write it down a bit later. Some interesting stuff about the different approaches. So in the project we started last time, the data modeling was more or less following the EPP model with a bit of optimization in some areas. So this is an example domain model, whereas Martin in his proposal, he tried to incorporate the JS contact structure. Sorry, this domain, there's a contact which is also in the first variant, following the EPP model, and Martin proposed doing the same in the JS contact. So I don't want to judge now which one is better or not. I think we should have this discussion on the mailing list, but I think this is quite similar to the discussion we had on RDAP context, whether to use simple contact or JS contact. So we have to discuss this for sure. Yeah, so what we aim for the future work in the hackathons, but also between the meetings, I guess, is to have a publicly available working test environment. So actually the sandbox is already there. I will write something about it on the mailing list. The only thing which is not yet there are kind of credentials, so everyone can use. And when I solve this part, it will be available, and also a Docker version which anyone can run locally. Of course, we want to work further on the requirements, and we see the work that we do in the hackathon valuable to the requirements discussion, and to finish the designs and continuously update the existing prototypes. So if you want to look up for the references to all the drafts, of course, the open API specifications that I mentioned. There are also open repositories about some of the implementations that are done in the hackathon. And there are these test instances, as I mentioned, the last one is there, but without credentials, you can't use it. So when I solve this problem, I will send it around. All right, so this was the hackathon update. If there are any questions, I don't see the queue.
What we think we might do is collect any questions. I don't think there are any. There's no one in the queue.
Is your microphone on?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Is it now?
Yeah.
Okay. It's no little light. No, so because we have several related topics, we might hold questions until the end of this section. So what we'll do now is you queuing up the slides for the next presentation, which is Pavel again on RPP design challenges.
Are you sharing?
No, sorry.
So do we take questions from Jim or?
Yeah. If you don't mind, Gavin, just a very quick question here. When you're doing all these work in the hackathons, it's great stuff. Could we please have a better representation of what reporting on that coming back to the mailing list? I'm very junky paper at the moment. A lot of the work being done on GitHub, and we're relying on reports coming back from GitHub. And then if we're bypassing the mailing list and doing stuff in the hackathons, that also is a little bit uncomfortable for me. So I'd like to see more discussion and reporting on the mailing list. Thanks.
Right. Okay, so let's move to the other related presentation, which I actually most of the content was created already during the hackathon in Bangkok, but we didn't have time in the working group to present it. But it was also updated with the new findings from the current hackathon. So this food for thought presentation from like summarizing a lot of discussions which were happening on the table. So read through it. You were warned. So, you know, like software developers are sometimes like lawyers. If you ask 2, you get 3 answers. So this like this with designing RESTful APIs, and this is what we see also here. So the first one, what I wanted to refer to, is basically how to model the object creation interfaces. So some would say that if you know the URL of the resource, we will just use put to the known URL and to create the objects. If you have a domain name as a key, it is a unknown key. It also allows or offers some idempotency properties from the HTTP, and so the thought was, okay, why wouldn't we use it? So it would work also for host objects, for contacts. It would work with the question mark. If the server assigns the ID, it is not known upfront. So here we will have already a bit of put versus post dilemma. And actually there was discussion whether this property that put can be used also as full object update in the HTTP vocabulary, whether it's good or not, because the EPP sees these 2 paths completely distinct. The first question was asked, okay, whether we use posts actually everywhere just to have a convenience that it's same every time, or we offer this tool depending on the object type and its properties. And the second one was what I mentioned, whether this ambiguity of put is actually helpful or not. So I think the current hackathon implementations are using all posts. This was also the feedback from the developers who were not familiar with the specification upfront. It was like, are you nuts to use put? So I think this was enough feedback. But the second one was, which I think also ran over the mailing lists already several times, is the modeling of the check command. So I think the original draft from Martin specified it as a simple head on the domain resource. So going deeper in the semantics of the heads, it should be actually the same as get, but without payload. And what we noticed the way implementing it, that actually many frameworks, or the frameworks that we use at least, actually do that. So they execute the full get, which is mapped to an info command, which may be much more expensive in the execution than the info command, when the check command should be. Of course, you can override this behavior, but if you are not aware, you may have this like hidden performance loss. Then we had a bit of discussion about the semantics of the check, because following the 5730, it should determine if actually the object creation would be successful afterwards, where HTTP is defining an expect header for this purpose. So we wanted to experiment whether this may be the way. So the conclusion so far was that maybe not, because of 2 reasons. One, that again, the developer feedback was a bit that this header is not well known, but this must not be an argument. But the second was that actually this expect header is on the list of some protected headers which the browser wouldn't send. So this will be against the requirement that we have about the clients that RPP should serve. So in R14.3, it is a should, that we should support a browser as a native client. So if we would use this header, this probably be problematic. So what we arrived with during the hackathon is actually to have a separate resource for check under with the path availability, with actually both methods allowed. So head for basically simple payloadless check, which will give you a no yes answer with the HTTP status code, and that you can also make a get to get full representation, which will tell you everything which right now the EPP check command has. So basically this addresses both concerns. One of having a command which is very performant for a typical use case where the main, let's say, check doesn't deliver more data than just yes/no answer. And in this scenario, actually, we can even use this framework behavior as an advantage, because in the execution, actually, the head is not different than get. The other aspect we discussed a lot was about so-called processing resources. So we want to move from RPC style to resource-oriented architecture, and it would define that actually you shouldn't define verbs to perform operations. You rather should try to define processing resources, which you will deal with like with any other resource with normal HTTP vocabulary. So this was the modeling of the transfer. Basically, that you will create a transfer object, you will get information about transfer object, and you can have an approval or rejection with additional payloads that you interact with. And you can also delete a transfer object basically to signal that you want to cancel it. This actually was working pretty much okay. So we also thought that it actually can work well for other kind of processes. So if you have renewal, you can interact with it the same way. And if you have a long-lasting process which are in the pending state in the EPP vocabulary, you actually can even have the representations of the states and retrieve additional data related to this processes. Yeah, to this more or less what I said. When the process of some kind is not supported, we have an HTTP vocabulary to express that, and a small bonus if some operation or some verb is not supported, we may use the options verb to basically find out which kind of HTTP commands are possible on this resource. But one thing that we kind of figured out, that actually the process landscape is not a closed one, it's rather extensible. So we have processes which are clearly defined for every object, but we may have new processes coming, which the RPP implementers may want to extend on. And from this perspective, it's useful to have a separated URL path for all processes as an enclosure. So basically, this namespace of process is not consuming from the general namespace of the resource. So this is why we propose now the structure, which is having the all process under the subpath, and in the bottom is example how a new process, which is consolidate coming from one of the extensions, could be added to the same structure, following the same pattern. And this same principle can be applied also to the resource representation, because we, in the operations that we perform, like domain creation, we have a part of the data which is actually belonging to the process, not to the object itself. Like period of the duration of the registration is only existing during the registration, but afterwards it's converted to expire date or whatever other properties the object may have. And the same applies to price and other components. So basically we thought that there's a process data which can be expressed the same way in the object representation. So if you write such an object, you provide it as this subtree. So there's a generic structure right now described in the draft. And the same way, if you read an object and you want to express the whole status of the running process, we don't say yet whether it's a must. Probably it should be an optional representation which will express all the data, that you can also read it in one go, including the process, what we are doing, or you can just express the pending transfer but by just expressing this part of the object. And one element we also discuss is how to deal with the outcode. So outcode in general is an authorization information which is used in the certain use cases, like reading object of the different owner or transferring objects between owners. So basically, if we look at it from HTTP perspective, we would want to use the authorization header from HTTP. And this actually what we had the discussion on the mailing list about it, that the idea would be great, but it's not covering our issue that we have two authorizations actually coming with the request. So one authorization about the client acting on the object, and second authorization which is coming actually from the domain holder through the client. So in order to avoid, I know, regenerating tokens or any such stuff, we came to the conclusion that second authorization would be good, but apparently HTTP semantics doesn't cover for that. So we have here a bit of a problem. So what we came up with is an own header, which is following the same semantics as HTTP authorization header, which is having a method, which will be a possibility for us in the future to define other methods than the current outcode. And for the out info, we basically define the one method which has right now two, let's say, keys and values. So the one is the out info, which is base 64 encoded because of the character limitations in the header, and the second is the raw ID, which can be optional in the which is optional in the EPP request. So we have to transport this as well. And one additional issue that we faced was about the definition of the optional fields. So basically, if you are familiar with JSON schema, on the left-hand side, you will see the typical representation of the optional property, which will basically be different in this required array and in the bottom. So every property which is required will be listed there, and every property which is not listed there is automatically optional, which is the natural way of doing it. And this sometimes comes to the very undesired effect. So on the right top, you see the example of a typical object with the missing the second property. But on the bottom right, you see a version of this object which actually is putting a null in this not required value. And this one won't validate against this schema because null is not a string. And the schema is defining this field as a string. So to overcome this, you would have to define the schema as an let's say two-type schema, either null or string, which can be not as natural as this JSON schema expression as visible here. So why it's coming? Because the frameworks do such thing. So if you define there's a Python expression, so if you define a field as optional, actually the framework, when serializing this object, would put this empty key in the representation. So I think this is something we should have a conversation whether we want to do this way or the other way, whether we want to allow this empty keys with null values, or we want to be restrictive and let's say force the implementations to remove it. So I have some other slides, but I think I'm just
Yeah.
landed. So
We were
the
just
others,
about to step in, so-
yeah, yeah. So this was exactly what I was expecting to happen.
Okay, thank you, Pavel. So we do have, Jasdeep is no longer in the queue. So, so what we'll do then is, you are in the queue. Okay, fine. So yeah, Jasdeep, if you want to go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't realize I got out of the queue. Hi, Jasdeep from Erin. So I think there's one fundamental confusion I see. I have read just the core draft. So post versus put. And I think the confusion just came, I thought I understood this, but typically, not to remind the group, post is for creates, typically. Put is for updates, and it's from the idempotency angle, right? Where post is not supposed to be idempotent, whereas puts are. So I think in the draft, I'm not mistaken, at least I'll quote the version, core 01 version. I think we're using post, and your presentation had puts, but in the paper itself, it is posts. So I just wanted to kind of, I think what you have is right. For instance, you're thinking for transfers, but I just wanted to raise that I hope I'm right. So on that front, so just wanted to point it out that looks like the core needs to be fixed for that, because that can be a serious point of contention. Thanks.
Can you be very quick, Jim?
Yes, it's just a quick observation. It's great all this work is going on in the hackathon, Pavel, and thanks to you for that. But I'm concerned again that we might be just having drawn expertise from a small pool, namely a few registry providers. Can we maybe try and encourage more participation from registrars so they could not going to see this as being sprung on them as a surprise?
Yeah.
Yeah, one.
Yeah. So this is my mantra. I'm telling on every registrar meeting when I'm attending. I also send up to the row workshop to make advertisement. And yeah, if you have magic wand to pull them here in the room, use your magic wand.
I think it's fair to say getting registrars involved in anything in this venue is quite difficult. There are only a handful that really participate. Thank you, Pavel. I'm going to hand over now to Jim Gould, who's on the line to talk about his Tiger Team work.
And you'll notice my video and my audio is working, but you're not going to hear me sing. Okay, just let you know. Okay. Hey, yeah, I'm going to be providing an update on the work that's been done by the Tiger team on the EPP extensibility and extension analysis. As presented before, the Google Doc is where we're doing our work. So if you want to go there and participate, you're welcome to. We've changed the goal a little bit. The initial goal was to look at the EPP extensions to help come up with recommendations for RPP, but we also added in recommendations for enhancements to EPP itself. So, and I'll be covering that here. You see the Tiger team, and as you'll notice, the Tiger team members are very active on the mailing list, so that's great. And what we've done is that we've analyzed 65 extensions thus far. Now, we're aware that there are more out there, there are more being created, but this is a good set to start with. And what we did was that we put those extensions into different forms of extensibility. And those extensibilities is broken into core extensibility, which is defined within the RFC. And then there's special extensibility, which we identified while we were reviewing the extensions. The two primary core extensibility types include the object extension and the command response extension. And you'll notice that 60% of those 65 extensions are command response extensions, which is quite a large number. For the object extension in EPP, 15 new objects were created beyond the core objects. And 7 of the object extensions fall into what we call a function extension, which is defining an object to really define, to create a new function. Like, for example, name suggestion. creating a suggestion object with an info command, or a registry object to create a registry info. So it's a way of defining new kinds of commands, really. The special forms of extensibility that we found, the command type extension, which defines new kinds of commands, like the restore command and the RGP RFC. I already covered the function extension, defining new poll messages. We thought that there would be a lot more key value pair extensions. We only found one. And that was kind of interesting. Operational practice, there were only two, but that is relatively new, and they're important extensions and really demonstrate the maturity of EPP. The object property extensions define new persistent properties on objects. And then the enumerated value extends the enumerations defined within the protocol. Oh, there we go. Now, these are preliminary recommendations for EPP. The intention was to present these only at the regex working group, but I'll present them here since they're our common set of attendees. The first is to enhance the RGP extension to move to a single step restore command. When we're discussing it, we didn't see a real purpose for the restore report. Nothing's done with it. So if we were able to simplify, get to a single step, we'll be able to simplify EPP as well as RPP at the same time. Another recommendation is associated with inclusion of an expire or end date for the RGP statuses, so clients know when those RGP statuses will expire. Another consideration is the deactivation feature that's included in the .sc EPP extension. We are recommending standardizing the consolidate or the sync command based on its simplicity and its usage within the TLDs that support it. We see an opportunity for the IDN extensions to consolidate and standardize them. We group these into two types. One is supporting IDN registrations with like the IDN language tag, defining the language, IDN table IDs and IDN mapping, and metadata on the IDN tables with the IDN table mapping. And then there's also relationship extensions, the related domain, the strict bundling, and the variant extension that was presented at the regex meeting. We are recommending consolidating and standardizing the balance extension, and there are 4 forms of this. There's low balance, balance, credit info, finance. Generally, these are meant to allow for registrars to be able to get the finance information or balance information on demand or via poll messaging when certain thresholds are met. And our final recommendation is for proprietary implementations to move to standard extensions. This includes the change poll, registry fee, organization extensions, and the RGP extension. And those were all the EPP recommendations. I'm moving now to the RPP recommendations. And what we did here was we broke these recommendations into 4 categories. The first is looking at the forms of extensibility in EPP to adopt in RPP. The second is high-level extensibility recommendations, and then high-level object-specific recommendations. And lastly, is what do we do about the 65 EPP extensions in RPP? So for the forms of extensibility, we put those into 3 categories. The first is for RPP to support it, not support it, or unknown. We're still trying to figure it out. For support, we're recommending that RPP support object extension, command response extension, what we call the command type extension to find new types of commands, and that's explicitly. And it's implicit right now in EPP. Function extension explicitly. Operational practice explicitly. Be able to define new persistent properties on objects, and then be able to extend enumerations. Not support, recommendations include the auth info. We didn't see any extensions for the auth info extensibility. And key value pair, if anybody advocates for key value pair, please see me afterwards. We'll have a great discussion, because every time it's come across my desk, it's never passed. Just to let you know. And we need to look and consider the transport mapping, and that I believe will be based on the layering that will wound up getting put into RPP. Now, these are the high-level RPP extensibility recommendations. I'm not going to have time to cover all these, obviously. We still, as a Tiger team, need to agree upon the list and the descriptions for these. There are 13 currently. I'm just going to provide an example of like 3 of them. The first is like an example is process information. That's where a client will provide input to drive the server processing. An example of this may be like in the registry fee extension to provide the fee for the server to verify that the fee matches what the server is going to charge. Another is new object types. As noted, EPP, we defined 15 new objects outside of the core objects. So that form of extensibility is needed. And then lastly, the read-only resources, the ability to be able to define objects for read-only purposes, like, for example, the balance information. For object-specific recommendations, we have 8 of them. Again, I will not have time to cover them in detail. For domain, we were talking about the lifecycle management, the ability to be able to add new statuses, be able to define new ways or new methods of lifecycle management for domain names, like how domains get deleted. And then name server representation, going beyond the host and name server linkage, the domain names, and support for NS sets. Now, for the EPP extensions, what we did was we have a mutual set of recommendations for each of the EPP extensions. The first is to embed the extension directly into RPP. Then there's an extension that is a higher or stronger form of design, which the recommendation is to create a standard RPP extension for the equivalent EPP extension. Design would be to ensure that RPP will support an EPP extension, but it doesn't need to be a standard one. Not applicable would be for like extensions that were created that are no longer supported. And then what we did was we added this additive recommendation of enhance. And enhance would apply to something like the RGP functionality to enhance what is defined within the EPP extension when doing it in RPP. These are the groupings of EPP extensions that we're recommending to embed directly into RPP. The RGP extension, the DNSSEC extension, the RGP poll if restore stays a 2-step process. Login security should be handled automatically. Unhandled namespaces to ensure that we have appropriate signaling and capability handling between client and server. Secure auth info for transfer. Full support for internationalized email addresses. Gavin's favorite, TTL extension, of course. And the organization mappings, because in EPP you have the client identifier, but to be able to support a mechanism to get more information about the client identifier. Extensions, I've already covered recommendations for EPP and standardizing the sync, IDN extensions, balance extensions. My personal recommendation would be to standardize them first in EPP and then follow suit in RPP for those. But then also look at standardizing the existing RFCs with the launch phase, allocation token, change pool, registry fee, and registry maintenance. There's additional recommendation for the LV contact and LV domain extension to create standards extensions for those in RPP. And then for design, there are a total of 33 EPP extensions that we've tagged for design. And we believe that if RPP meets the extensibility recommendations, that these EPP extensions will be supported. But the Tiger team will perform an analysis after the RPP design is complete to ensure that these 33 extensions are supported. And our next steps are to finalize the recommendations. I believe that we're close. They're candidate right now. Recommendations, we would like to finalize them, post them to the mailing list ahead of the next IETF, present them at the next IETF, and then go ahead and perform the analysis of the recommendations for embed extension design after the RPP design is complete. And that's it.
Thank you, Jim. So we have 2 people in the queue, and I've locked the queue because we want to move on. So Ulrich.
Well, hi, this is Ulrich from ICANN. First I want to say, wow, I'm blown away by the amount of work you have done in the team. Congratulations, it's really impressive. And I just wanted to say one point is, I want to bring up, I think one of the problems we have in EPP is that a lot of extensions have like optional things. You know, if you think of the DNSSEC extension, yeah, you support the DNSSEC extension, but which of the 2 interfaces are you supporting? And EPP has no way of expressing which one it is. And maybe we consolidate that in RPP, or we do it, but I think we will need a way to say, okay, we're supporting this interface so that clients don't have to guess, or, you know, make a special client for every registry. I think we all want to avoid that. Yeah, thank you.
And Pavel.
Yes, Pavel Wagdenik. So as an immediate reaction, I would comment chip into requirements. It sounds like a very great requirement. I think we have something like this in the profiles, but if it's not yet good enough, we welcome any feedback. And actually, this relates to my actual question. Maybe we'll cover it on the mailing list as well, because as editors from requirements, we ask ourselves if the conclusions which are intermediate now or preliminary from the Tiger team, if we can start including them into the requirements, because there are quite a few. It's quite a lot of work, and I think starting to include them would also facilitate the discussion on the mailing list on this.
Thank you. And you're up next. So yeah, so Pavel was going to talk about architecture. Give the clicker.
Yeah, this will be a very short update on the architecture document. So just to recap, we have an initial draft proposed in the last IETF meetings. There are a few feedbacks on the mailing list, 3 feedbacks privately, basically generally positive. It proposes a layered architecture following the resource-oriented approach, and to reuse as much as possible from the HTTP layer, basically not to reinvent the wheel. So this is just an update what we've done for 02 version. So we actually compared the actual version of the requirements, whether everything is already covered in the architecture. This resulted in a list of issues of the things that were not well covered, and the changes that are basically listed here. So basically with the reference to the requirements, which we thought that needs, let's say, more focus in the architecture. So I won't be going through them now. This is just to let you know and to invite you to discussion on this on the mailing list. There is some other items open, but most of them are about may should requirements. So we will have to take a look whether it's worthwhile to include them now, or maybe in the later work when this may should would go more on the left hand side or the right hand side. There's also one which is marked as blocked because here we see that discussion on the requirement itself is already very open, and so we don't want to put the text in place. So the question that I wanted to ask is whether it's already a right point to adopt this document. I think from our editors or authors' point of view, it should facilitate the requirements discussion if we adopt it, and basically engineers like to work on something which is engineering, not on the requirements. So I think it would be useful.
Thank you, Pavel. I see Jasdev in the queue. And then I'm now going to lock the queue because we need to move on to the next item. So Jim gets in as well.
Hi, Jasdeep Singh, Erin. So I think, I don't know process-wise where this will belong, but I just want to remind the group, and I think it's a good thing to do, something we have lately learned, because there's architecture, that's why I wanted to bring it up here. IJSON and Unicode assignables. I think we did talk about it, so my request is it should go into the core architecture or wherever. So for everybody's benefit, it essentially helps you prevent non-characters, surrogates, and we rather not, I would say, loosely use JSON RFC as a normative reference. But this is something was brought up on the RDEP side, so there it's not that easy. But here, since we are starting from scratch, just wanted to recommend that. So,
absolutely,
thanks.
very good feedback. Thank you. I think we can put it both in architecture and in the core document, but I think as a guiding principle, architecture is the right place for it. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim.
Thanks. I'll be short on this. I just want to say that I reviewed the architecture draft, and it looks really well written. There's things that I don't agree with, and that's fine. And I'm going to post those on the list. And as far as working group adoption, I'm not exactly sure of the pecking order on this. I think it's a good document that could be adopted, and I'm not sure whether or not we should get farther along on the requirements before moving for adoption. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. So we now get to the main event. So Martin, you're up.
So about adoption, should I put a request on the mailing list and see
That's
how
right.
it goes?
Yep, that's
Okay.
correct, yeah.
Great, I'm being promoted to be the main event. Hope this doesn't set the expectations too high, but okay.
There's the clicker. Thank you. 1 second.
Oh. So we've just a short while ago published a new version of our requirements documents, the 0.1 version. And it's getting along pretty well. We're not there yet, of course. And the main purpose of this session is to look at the open issues that are kind of blocking progress further. And because we need to come up with a document that is stable enough and has and where there is consensus before we can continue to any further phases, such as the design phase. And also I want to emphasize that at the point when the requirements are stable and there is some consensus that this is a set of requirements that we can continue with, then we're not seeking to publish it as a RFC or informational RFC or whatever at this moment, because we're going to keep it as a working document, so it is easier to modify. But it is going to be more difficult to go back and update requirements after we have decided that it is ready to continue to the next design phase. So I just want to emphasize that as so people in the room might be more motivated to look at the requirements as is and contribute. So this is a short highlight of like what's currently in the requirements and kind of design goals and stuff like that. And it's pretty familiar. We have presented this before. So it's based on HTTP and using a REST architectural style, of course. One of the main goals is it should be a developer-friendly API and easy to integrate with existing systems and future systems. This is, of course, a fairly non-specific, subjective requirement, but so there is also discussion about this one. And a big focus is on performance and scalability. Functionality, it should be equivalent to EPP, unless there is consensus that some features or elements in EPP haven't turned out to be that useful over the years, then we might decide not to include them in RPP. As Jim also mentioned that it should be extensible and support existing EPP extensions, and some of these extensions might end up being part of RPP core instead of being RPP extensions because they are used so heavily in EPP. We would like to see support for multiple data formats. The charter for now explicitly only mentions JSON, so the focus is on JSON, but any future work should not, or the work should not preclude any future use of potentially other data formats if possible. We'd also like to include some discovery mechanism, so finding a server, and once a server is being detected, okay, what kind of features does a server support? And also for authentication frameworks, if we have support for more advanced authentication than just using a user password, then maybe more advanced use cases can also be developed for RPP. For instance, we maybe transform the transfer process or name server updates. And of course, there's also other work at the IETF that might impact RPP in the future, or at the moment already, such as DELAG. They are still heavily trying to figure out how this is going to look like, but we should also try to keep in mind that this is something that we should be able to support, even though we don't really know how it's going to look like. So as I mentioned, there are multiple issues at the moment. We have picked 8 of them that are kind of blocking. And the idea is now that we're going to do some hands up to get a kind of a reading. Okay, how does this working group feel about these issues? So that will give us a direction to go with. And most of these questions we have also asked them at the last Center Jamboree. Center is the European community for TLDs, and we'll also be showing the results of the Jamboree. And all this feedback will go back into an update of the document. Yeah, this is just an overview of GitHub and our issues. So the first one is a big one. We had a lot of discussion about this one already. So strict versus lenient data validation. There are 2 requirements in the document as now. And 4.5 says basically promotes loose coupling. It should be possible to add new features or, for instance, data attributes to server output without breaking existing clients. And we have another one requirement, 4.6, that says, okay, we recognize that there are 2 different modes of validation, strict versus lenient, and it's up to the server to decide which one of them is supported. Well, there are, of course, positives and negatives about both of them. These are like the main ones that we see that for strict, we can run into serious issues with protocol evolution. For instance, it's going to be harder to add new features to your API without, as I also mentioned, breaking existing implementations. And this is not only for like official IETF work, but also for private changes and extensions to RPP deployments, of course. And the server, yeah, if we do strict validation, then the server would have to reject the entire request, even if there's a single field that doesn't understand or support. And for lenient, we've noticed that it's kind of the standard way at the moment for API development, RESTful API development, and JSON representations, to ignore properties that are unknown or unsupported. And that doesn't preclude the server sending back warnings for detected attributes that have not been used because they're unsupported. So the clients are able to see that they're sending stuff that isn't supported, but the request is still able to be being processed. And it's also the default way of working with the OpenAPI spec, which is also heavily used in RESTful API development. So now we get to our first question. Unfortunately, the Meet Echo tool.
Yeah. So we'll do the show of hands very shortly, but I think we have 2 people in the queue. I think it's probably worth hearing their questions.
Yeah. So
before we poll the room.
Yeah,
so,
I forgot to mention that there is probably time to discuss each question. We can do it before the show of hands or after the show of hands when the results are in.
Let's have some questions first, because I don't want to have to repoll. So
yeah, okay.
If Scott would like to come up and ask his question.
Okay, thank you. Scott Hollenbeck. Martin, on slide 2, there's some words there, and I'm paraphrasing, about it being difficult to change requirements like over time, right? Changing requirements can become more difficult, right? I am hoping that we are not advocating for a waterfall development method here where we identify requirements, lock them in concrete, and move on to the next phase, because I'm almost willing to bet money on the fact that we are going to identify new requirements, changes to requirements, etc., as we move through the development process.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That is totally not the idea. We just want to prevent that we continuously have to go back to the requirements and discuss things over and over again for basically some of these things might just be bike shedding about whatever. And it of course, if we go into design or architecture or whatever, and we find that stuff doesn't work out as anticipated, we have to go back to requirements and change requirements. So that's it.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
So just to comment on that, so there does need to be consensus within the working group on those requirements, but we can obviously have conversations to come to that consensus. The requirements document can stay a internet draft during the course of the work that the working group does, and doesn't need to become an RFC like carved in stone. It doesn't have to become an RFC at all, but maybe we want to do it at the end rather than the beginning, just to capture the final version of those requirements.
Yeah.
So the only requirement is consensus, doesn't have to be finished. Okay, Jim Gould.
Yeah, I really need to mirror the discussion that I've had on the list related to this, and that it needs to be strict. I mean, we're talking about a provisioning protocol for critical internet services. If there is a chance that the server will process a command that is partially processed, and the client continues on assuming that it was fully processed, it could cause internet stability issues. I gotta say that if we didn't validate everything up front, there could be vulnerable content being passed through into deep layers of the registry if it's not validated up front and fully validated. And I just wanted to let you know that we monitor all the input, even free-form text input being sent via EPP, and we identify things that are vulnerable. So it would be a showstopper if it was not strict. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good concern. So
yeah, I will start the show of hands.
We have Paolo on the queue. Maybe
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Paolo.
Yeah. So just this is why we right now reflected in requirements to actually support both variants, because we see that there is a policy-driven, let's say, need for both kind of handling, and usually preferred way is from 2 options to choose one. We heard from what Ulrich commented before, but so far we haven't found a better way.
Okay, any more comments? The show of hands is now open, so go ahead. Go ahead, Justin.
Sorry, just one quick clarifying question. This data validation, does it mean required versus not required fields in JSON, or does it mean syntactical and semantical checks on the back end? I didn't get that.
Both, they're different. So you can still have your checks at the back end for every piece of data that you receive. So if that's your like server policy, then that's fine.
Ulrich.
Oh, this is Ulrich from ICANN again. I think the IETF has actually some history with this. It's called Postal's Law. Be lenient in what you receive and strict in what you send, I would say. And I think that would be a very good idea to do even in this case, because if we have options, then the registrars will by definition, the registrars will send stuff that doesn't belong to the registry. But then the registry, on the other hand, when you send it, you should be follow your very strict what do you do.
Yeah, that's a good one. You can split it. So you say, okay, we validate the hell out of everything that the client sends us, but do allow the server to send additional fields that are not supported by every client, but okay, let's see. So we're here. So this, can we go to the next?
Do you want to queue up the next slide?
No, there are 3 questions regarding this question, actually, because of the limitations in Meet Echo. We cannot ask a question with multiple answers, so they have to be yes or no.
Okay, fine. All right. So yeah, here's the next show of hands.
So the previous one was, should it support strict, and this one is, should it only support lenient? Oh, sorry, both. Sorry. My bad.
Is that a new hand, Jasdeep?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Sorry, just what Ulrich, he said about the John Postel law. Actually, that's interesting and a very important thing he said. But the latest IIB position, if I now recall, is to really forewarn about what's called protocol decay. I can't recall the RFC, and I can quote it to the group, which says that you should not let errors liberally go through, because otherwise protocols start decaying from interoperability angles. So I don't know how to interpret it completely, but I just wanted to remind the group that as much as we revere John, this is not sanctimonious anymore.
Yeah, so I think there's also a difference between like updating protocols in the IETF versus running a RPP system as a registry and doing stuff outside of the IETF, which should be as painless as possible for a registry if they want to have some sort of protocol evolution for adding new features without breaking existing deployments. That's where are you? 6.
Okay. I'm going to close the current show of hands. I think we have about the same number of votes as last time, and I will start the next one. The results are shown, but if someone could put them into the notes, that would be appreciated. So next show of hands is, should RPP support only strict data validation?
I'll let you know. It's 40 minutes.
Yeah. 7 more questions, so we need to go faster.
Yeah.
So again, we got kind of pretty much hit the limit of the number of votes. If anyone has anything further to say, we can probably finish this now.
Yes.
Okay. Right. Do we want to discuss the results?
Yeah, maybe you can show the slide for the center result. Oh, I can do that.
Yeah.
Sorry. So this was an interesting one at the center meeting. We didn't reach consensus there as well. So it seems familiar. But if I do remember correctly, we did receive feedback there that we should just pick one and not do both. Correct me if I'm wrong, Paul. That was like the main point that we got there. And that's basically also what I see here. So we should definitely not do both. And lenient and versus strict. You have strict has more votes here now. So I think this is also because of the limited number of people here. It's also not very conclusive yet. So we'll, as for all of these questions, they will all go to the mailing list as well, so that people who were not here will also get a chance to weigh in, and we'll put all that feedback into the document and try to come up with something that will meet consensus. So if there are any additional questions for this one.
I do see Ori with his hand up.
Hi, Ori Steele speaking as an individual. For the folks who've responded with strict as the sort of preferred, only strict as the preferred path forward, I wonder if there could be some discussion around what is the difference in strict processing within RPP versus EPP. I don't have enough awareness around the details here, but it's my naive understanding that EPP sort of takes a strict by default approach. And so I'm wondering why we would need another only strict by default approach. Maybe I'm not phrasing that, perfectly correct, but that's a question I have in my mind as a sort of non-expert in the space. Thanks.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of a fundamental difference when handling XML versus handling JSON. That's a kind of, because of XML schemas, XML usually gets validated very thoroughly. And for JSON, unfortunately, there is no standardized schema for JSON yet. And even if we did, then we'd still might be prefer to do lenient. So I'm not sure either. Right.
So Jim is in the queue.
Yeah, I can help answer that a little bit. I mean, obviously EPP has an XML schema, but not all servers implement schema validation. And the other thing that the servers may or may not do is validate the set of extensions that are passed. So some registries may just ignore extra extensions that are passed, but in our case, we absolutely do not. Every extension is validated against the XML schema with full schema validation. And for RPP, it would be ideal if there was an equivalent kind of a schema structure or approach, but there really isn't in JSON a similar kind of XML schema functionality. I think recently there was JSON structure that was brought up that may be of interest to look at.
Yeah, so JSON structure is probably going to be a new working group in near future, but that's still heavily in work in progress. So I'm not sure if we should depend on that, because it might cause some big problems in our timelines. Okay, next question. If there are no further questions. Okay, so sorry.
Ori Steele as an individual, there are schema approaches for building JSON protocols. You have CDDL, which people use for both JSON and CBOR. You have JSON schema, the internet draft version, and that's been widely adopted, even within OpenAPI, as you mentioned. And then, as you mentioned, there's also folks working on JSON structure out there. So I think to say that there aren't schema approaches for JSON is just like there are several, and lots of people build protocols on top of them. I think the question is, well, why would you require that in a protocol that you were building? on top of JSON? And that's the interesting question to have here. And I'm sort of suspiciously looking at how similar to the EPP approach this design is and wondering, what are you actually getting from your JSON data model? Thanks.
Yes, thanks. Okay, next question. Response caching. So we have a requirement that says that if applicable, then operations in RPP should be able to or must support cacheability of the response body using standard HTTP mechanisms. But it doesn't mean that every server or client must support this. So you can still choose not to do this if you don't like response caching. And basically, HTTP has a good built-in support for caching, and also RFC 9205, like the guideline for building protocols with HTTP, has a nice line in it that says that one of the benefits for caching in HTTP is that it can really help improving scalability and reduce latency and improve reliability. And even if when we decide not to support caching in RPP, then we still need to think about caching, because it will influence the way RPP is being used by clients and by servers, because the caches can exist all along the path between client and server. And we need to figure out how, even if RPP doesn't support caching itself, it might still influence that. Okay, next question.
Ori, is that an old hand or a new hand? Okay. Anyone want to talk about this topic? Add yourself to the queue. Come to the mic. Less interesting to the audience, apparently. Okay, Jim.
Yeah, I have to say something about the caching, because I really don't understand the usefulness of the caching for a provisioning protocol itself. Maybe for queries, but these are small packets. And in general, you need to get an authoritative answer from the server. Getting the cache would be more applicable if they're very large packets, or you don't really care how, authoritative the answer is. So I guess I question it in a provisioning protocol. Thank you.
So, about Nick. So as a comment to this, Jim, if we consider just provisioning use cases, you are likely very right, but we are talking about read-only resources, or profile documents or discovery documents, which may be more static in the nature. And I think just to have it in the design, so the object types may use caching if I find it useful. I think it's an important thing.
Jim Reid speaking solely for myself. When you say consider caching requirement is crashing in the requirements, is that just say that when we develop the requirements document, we will consider the implications of crashing, or are we actually going to say the requirements document is going to make caching a mandatory or an optional requirement?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So even as I said, so even if we say that RPP must support caching, then it's still up to the operator who deploys RPP to decide if it likes to use it or not. It's
Sure, Martin, but the wording, I think, of the question here is kind of confusing or ambiguous. Is it consider it when you're
that's what you mean.
Or, yeah, sorry, Pavel.
So the choice of words was like that because you have three options. You can say must support caching, you can say must not support caching, you can say nothing. So first we wanted to figure out whether RPP should tell anything about caching in the sense, and not yet saying whether we should forbid it or support it by any means.
Yeah. So it's still, so it will be something that we will have to look at during design. So where does caching come in? Can it help? And this might be a good example for where we see during design and architecture that this isn't very useful, and we can go back to the requirements document and say, okay, we're not using caching because of these and these reasons. Okay, so that's yes, 8. So the
sorry, Jim, did you have something you wanted to say, Jim Gould?
Yeah, I kind of want to respond to what was said about the use of caching, where in the core protocol that it may not be applicable, but then for peripheral kinds of things like the profile descriptors and that sort of thing, it may. And I just want to say, in my case, for profiles which provide like a registry info kind of response, which is really large, it's very infrequently used. So I'm not sure how caching would come into play there. Unless it's used a lot and it's large, will you get the value? That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, so as at the moment, we have no good idea of what RPP is actually going to look like in the final protocol, what features will be added that maybe are not yet in EPP. So I don't think we should exclude the possibility for caching just based on the experiences that we have with EPP at the moment. So interesting thing that during the Jamboree, the response was that, oh, meh, we don't need it, which is quite different than we have here in the room.
I think that we're maybe asking a different question here because of the word consider.
Yeah, so yeah, that might be the case. So we have to maybe go back a little bit and see if we can explain this one. Okay, next, historical data. This is an optional extension. Oh,
sorry, did I do that? That's me. Hold on.
A potential historical overview of an object, or changes, events linked to an object over a time window that can be determined by a server policy, and potentially also may include the transactional overview of the different processes that have been executed on objects. So you might see if you say, okay, the server supports a timeline of a year, and you might see all the updates that have been executed on an object over the entire period of that year.
Yes. Yep. And I see Scott in the queue.
Thank you, Scott Hollenbeck. Just an observation. This requirement is moving from provisioning to reporting. Keep that in mind, please.
Yeah, this is blurring the line a little bit, or going over the line, depending on how you look at it. But yeah, that's true. And this is one of the use cases where we say, okay, having a RESTful API that's easy to use might also be useful to add additional features to it, things that are not available in EPP at the moment, or will never be available in EPP, for instance.
I think I think it's important also how the question is formulated here. So we are talking about the requirement which is in the extensibility part, and this is actually in the appending saying about what kind of extensions we might build. So it's all on maybe to think of it whether RPP should support the way to extend it so that such use case can be supported if someone wants it. So there's a bit of twist in this question.
Yeah, it's true. It doesn't say that we want to build this extension. Just RPP should be able to support this type of extension. That's a subtle difference here, but very important one. Thank you.
Jim Gould.
Yeah, actually, as the designer of the Who Was extension itself, I have to say that, yeah, we defined it, we implemented it, we had to shut it down due to lack of usage. But I'd say that RPP should be able to support extensibility based on what I had presented earlier. So it should work, but I wouldn't focus on it.
And Ulrich.
Hi, this is Ulrich from ICANN again. I would say, isn't it hard enough to agree on provisioning? Do we really need another topic for this? And I totally agree that this feature is needed for registrars, but maybe not in RPP. Maybe we could have the reporting interface working group at some point in time, but I think it's like, don't let us overload this and make it a Swiss Army knife protocol.
Go full circle and have RRP again, registry reporting protocol.
Yeah, so I understand the concern of building a very nice Christmas tree with all kinds of nice features in it. We should definitely be careful here, but I do feel that we should at least think about the possible types of extensions that might become useful in the future, and not build something now or design something now that makes it harder in the future to support new features. Okay, so let's see if we can go to the results of. So here at the center results, we have, yeah, so it was a year more clear that the majority say, okay, we don't need this, or we have no opinion about this. And that kind of mirrors what I get here in the room a little bit. So that's nice. Oh, so this one is also interesting. This one's about bodiless requests and responses. So compared to EPP, where it's like a packet protocol where you have one packet that's a request and you get one packet back, which is a response. It's like XML in, XML out. If you go to a more a RESTful API, then you can make use of HTTP methods, URL structures, and headers, and that might be enough for a lot of the commands, EPP commands that you want to map onto a RPP solution. So you don't maybe need message bodies for some requests, for instance, the head, get, and delete, for instance. There might be situations where there is no need to send any additional data besides the standard things that I mentioned, just the URL, the get, the URL, the method, and potentially few headers. And the same goes for some of the responses. For instance, if you delete a domain name and there's nothing going on in errors or whatever, then you might not need to send back an entire message body with all kinds of additional data that is probably not of interest to the registrar, because they only want to know, did the thing work, or did it go wrong somewhere? And if they can get a status from the header, just like HTTP 404 or 400 or whatever, then they can very quickly decide, okay, this thing is okay, go to my next step in the flow, and if something went wrong, then figure out what to do then. But there are some complications here. For instance, for the EPP check and delete, there are some extensions that might add data to additional data to the response. So if you want to do a head method only for a EPP check style of command, then we run into issues, because the head method, of course, does not expect to be to receive a message body in the response. That's also partly why we, as Pavel had shown in the presentation before, we now propose 2 different endpoints for a check for availability. So yeah, as the last line on the slide says, so parts of the protocol can or must be covered by HTTP headers. And we had something in the requirements document from the beginning, and we updated it in the latest version. So in the previous version, we had text that said that the RPP must not include a message body in the request and response when it's not necessary. And in the newer version, we have changed this that RPP should not be designed to include a message body in the request or response when it's not necessary, for reasons that I just explained. So the main question is, so do we want to support, I'm going too fast. Do we want to support the use of bodiless requests and responses?
Look at my screen. Sorry, but it's on the big screen as well there on the left.
Yeah.
I just want to say we've got, I think, another 7 more of these show of hands, and we've got 20 minutes. So
yeah, we'll go faster.
We need about 2.5, 3 minutes per in order to stay in time. So,
Jim, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I'll make this really quick. It would have been great if there was a third option here to make it additive. So therefore, 4 extensions that currently are used in EPP that are complex, like to the check command, it could be supported in RPP as is, instead of having to move things around to headers. Thank you.
Okay. So I think the room is pretty clear here. Let's see. Yeah, well, the folks at Center were also pretty clear here that they feel that it would be a good idea to see if we can map some of the requests to use the HTTP headers, URLs, and methods. So this is nice. I'll have to, if there are no any questions, then I'll skip to the next one. Okay. Passwords. At the moment, in EPP, we have a integrated password lifecycle, and there's a command, or it's at least there's a field in the it's what sits in the login, where you can set up a new password. And well, in RPP requirements, we now have a similar requirement that it should be able to support users updating their credentials. But I'm not sure if I made a mistake here and changed the text. So there's also an RFC, I'm not sure if the number is, about secure passwords in EPP. That's also important. I think this one also, this question is also about, should it be part of the protocol itself? So do we want, as an EPP, a separate command for changing passwords, or do we want to, as a delegate this a little bit more to the HTTP layer to handle authentication? Then we could use more of the standard HTTP stuff for that. Okay, let's see if we can ask the question now.
Yeah.
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think we have a indicative result.
Well, unfortunately, there is no similar question asked at the center meeting, so we cannot compare our responses with theirs. But it seems pretty clear that, at least here, that most people think that it should not be part of the protocol itself. This new one, this new question, question 6, is more related to caching. It's about, where do you want to put the transaction information? Do we want to keep it in the request and response messages? And with transaction information, we mean attributes in EPP, such as the client transaction ID and server transaction ID. Do we want that as part of JSON requests and responses? Or would it be more useful to create new headers, HTTP headers, where we put that status information, transaction information, so that clients do not have to parse the complete message body, but have quick access to HTTP headers to fetch the data from there. If there is no, if you combine this, for example, with a status header, then the client can quickly figure out, okay, the request went okay, just grab the transaction identifiers from the headers and continue, and doesn't need to parse a message or whatever. So that might make things a little bit more efficient. Okay.
Ulrich, and I'm going to say, since this has been prompted by Jim Gould, perhaps Jim would like to join the queue and give his basis for his suggestion. But go ahead, Ulrich.
Okay, so this is Ulrich from ICANN again. I would like to ask a question. Have we looked in if this transaction ID is actually used by anybody?
No, to be honest, I have not personally looked at this, but it's interesting to see. Oh, no, I did hear from registrars that they did use it sometimes, but I'm not sure how often. So,
I mean, I know of, I actually have no registrar that uses it, and I know of several registrars that send the same transaction ID for everything.
Yeah, it could be useful for order trails and whatever. But this is a good example of maybe a question we should take back and see if we can find registrars. As I think Pavel also mentioned, that this is very difficult to get registrars involved in something like this. We're, of course, trying to meet with registrars, discuss this topic, and maybe get their opinions, feedback, and suggestions for what they like, what they don't like. So this is a continuing, ongoing effort. And
for the sake of time, shall we start the question while people comment?
But Jim, go ahead, please, Jim Gould.
Great. To answer Ulrich, yeah, the transaction IDs from the server side would be used for troubleshooting for sure. For the client, it would be used as an asynchronous completion token for pipelining. So that would be the usage. And as far as putting in the HTTP headers, I believe that would be a design decision only for caching. If naturally it's application data, and I believe it should be in the payload. Thank you.
Well, it is not only for helping to support a caching mechanism. It does with the headers in the transaction. You cannot use caching, that's correct, but it's also to be able to more efficiently be able to handle responses from the RPP server, so that the information headers is much more easy to access than having to go to the document itself in the payload.
So one aspect was the bodiless request. So if there is no body in some requests, you have to put it somewhere else, or you have to basically you cannot use these transaction IDs. And answering the questions, actually we are the registry not having client transaction IDs for every kind of transaction, so only for writing transactions. And we had the registrar requesting, why won't you support it also for reading? Maybe off record why they need it. That's a different story.
Okay. Q, speaking with my registrar hat on. This microphone's a bit low. So transaction IDs are actually fantastically useful. They're not just for pipelining in EPP, which is nice. I can send off a load of commands at once. But there's many cases where I send a command to a registry and then get a response back hours, days later. And the way this is correlated is with the transaction ID. So if I need, if a customer clicks a button and this results in a message to the registry, and then I need to say, okay, the registry is going to think about it. They'll get back to you about it. And then the registry can send me a message saying, okay, this transaction is now completed or this transaction is now failed. And then I can map that to what I put in my database and go, okay, which transaction was that? Who do I need to tell?
Yeah, exactly. So asynchronous transactions, this is very useful.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Close the poll.
Okay. This one's also interesting. So we have some discussion about client data omission. So at some point, maybe due to regulations, clients maybe do not want to send some data to the server, but they need to have some way of indicating that they're not transmitting the data that they should be transmitting to the server for certain fields. The moment, normally what you would see is that they would just fill in blanks or whatever. But a better way would be for the client to be able to say, okay, I'm not filling in these and these fields because of whatever reasons. Let's see. Yeah, so let's go straight to the question for the sake of time.
Was it closed? No,
it's still going. I see Scott in the queue.
Thank you, Scott Hollenbeck. I apologize for not being as familiar with the draft as I should be, but is there a corollary requirement to this that says something along the lines of the server can reject a client's attempt to omit data if it does so like in a way that's inconsistent with policy or something?
Yeah, well, that would be the decision to use strict.
Well, no, there's a difference, I think, between strict validation and the client putting X's in a place where it should be putting a telephone number or something.
Yeah, true. No, there is nothing in the requirements at the moment for that. So that would be just server policy, for instance, for doing more validation on input that they are receiving. I'm not sure if that's something that we want to put into the requirements.
Well, but I think if you're going to have a requirement like this, you need to have, as I said, another requirement that says something about the way the server can deal with this.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any more comments? Anyone not made up their mind that wants to vote? Otherwise, we can move on.
Yes. Okay. This one we did check with the folks at the Jamboree, and well, they were pretty clear here that for the most part they said, "Oh, we don't need this," or "I have no opinion." So there was not a single person that said, "Okay, I need this." So that's interesting. There's more of a split in this room between yes and no. So I'll have to look into this one further. And this is the last one.
No.
Here's this.
I have two questions here, but
no, those are extra questions if you have some extra time left, but we probably don't have extra time left. So we have a requirement. That's kind of a meta requirement in the document now, and it says, okay, we would really like, and then made it a must, that the new API should be really focused on making life easier for developers. So it should be really self-explanatory, easy to use, and present a nice and clean interface. So it would facilitate developers that they can use like the existing infrastructure that exists around HTTP API development. So integration with existing systems becomes easier, and they can reuse the existing knowledge that they already have when developing similar APIs. But unfortunately, the text is kind of subjective, of course. So this is not something that you can point to and say this means this when you if you want to. So Andy made some suggestions that yeah, what does this really mean? So we're kind of questioning right now. So do we need a requirement like this that doesn't really isn't really a hard requirement, but is something that we would really like to see as an end result? But so I see Andy is here as well, so he can maybe explain his comment a little bit more.
As an individual, who would ever put a requirement in that says it's hard to integrate and hard to use, right? So
True.
I just don't, this seems kind of superfluous, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, any further comments on this one?
No more votes?
Okay. That's pretty clear. For this one, oh, you were right.
Of course I am.
There's still another question. Sorry about that. So another important one is the purpose of profiles. So just like similar as in RDAP, we feel that RPP must also be able to use profiles for signaling certain types of, for instance, required parts of the data model, or that only a subset of certain functionality is used. But Jim Gould raised a point there, which he feels that it's going to be extremely complicated to map all these things to especially when we're talking about server configurations, to map these to profiles. And therefore he says, okay, we should probably not make this a must, but see if we can do this as an extension, or maybe do it a nice to have.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, we dealt with this firsthand in regex related to the registry mapping. That was just so complex. So I recommend that we focus on the core, and if an extension can be created, great. But otherwise, I would not touch this.
Q, I think instead of profiles, maybe we should, like this very complicated definition of profiles, it might be more helpful to talk in the same way that we do with RDAP, which is just there is a list of strings and these mean things. And we can have a string for the core RPP documents, and then you can go add your own for whatever else you're doing. And then someone else can write a long document explaining exactly what all of these strings mean, and then we don't have to map it to an API.
Yeah, so in the simplest form, it could be just as profiles being used in RDAP, yeah.
Jasdeep?
Hi, so I'm kind of struggling with this between that strict versus lenient. And I think so profiles help with leniency, if you think about it, right? And that was to Martin's earlier point that otherwise you straitjacket your protocol to not be very extensible. So, but at the same time, what Jim said, it as a must requirement, that's also too strong. So maybe should, because that means you can have a profile while yet having leniency for multiple use cases. And profiles provide strictness, if that makes sense. Like in RDAP case, and that's only just a read-only protocol, but it does tell you that profiles end up constricting those requirements for industries or areas. Thanks.
Yeah, this a good suggestion, combining profiles with possible lenient handling. Yeah, maybe that's a good one for the next hackathon to play around with. Thanks.
Okay, so we have less than a minute left. I don't know if we have time to.
Yeah, so the main, so we had all the questions. So the main thing now is that we really need people to volunteer and read the document and come up with comments and suggestions potential for changes. And also an important thing is, okay, are we missing anything? So we're doing our best coming up with all the things that we think that is needed for RPP. But if you feel that after reading the document that, okay, I'm missing potential use cases for my situation, then please let us know. Put on the list. Just doesn't have to be a lot of work. Just one line. Hey, I need this is enough for us just to get a hint of what is needed, and then we can add it. Yeah, I think our time, right?
Thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Well done. Very well done.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, thank you. So we do have 10 more minutes, and we're going to ask Christian to come up and present his deck on topic of DNS data representation. There you go. Do we need to give the slides to click on? There we go.
Okay, so I'm a bit of a DNS guy, so it gets more to DNS, and I want to have more DNS into RPP. So when it started with EPP, we have the delegation having NS records, and a year later there was added DNSSEC, and right now we have several other extensions. Either they are standardized or they are proprietary things. So that's a point right now. Even we have the DNS world moving on with Deleg and potentially redesigning how delegation should work. So starting from RC 1035, we have the resource records defined as having name, TTL, class, type, and RData. So actually class is potentially every time internet, so just omitting that it is defined as an optional parameter in the draft, but maybe thrown out. So name type and RData are actually defining what is to be provisioned, and TTL is something like an operational control, controlling how resolvers should react to those data. So I put it into a different. The version here is a bit different from that in the draft. This is because of the hackathon. So we had a review on that and put the controls into the existing structure. So again, 1035, the RData format, which is different for each RR type. And here are a few examples on how that is brought into the structure. So we have the NS RData format, which states NSD name. So we put NSD name in the object of the RData. Same for A records or quad A records, which stating addresses. So we use addresses. Last but not least, we have MX, where there are two fields, which are preference and exchange. And we can go the one with DS records, with DNS key records, and you name it. So here's an example of a full delegation, which could be used as a host attribute. So the point here is that like in a zone file, we can have different versions of name. So add is referring to the domain name which it is provided for. And we can have a fully qualified domain name, and we could have relative names that get expanded by the domain name. Yeah. So where we are right now. So we have EPP extensions or definements in the core protocol. We have host attributes, which is basically a DNS structure put under a domain object. We have host object, which are objects having a DNS structure under a different object. We have DNSSEC, which is an extension having DNS structures for DS or DNS key records. And last but not least, we have TTL, an extension which has some operation and controls. Not to mention, DNSSEC has an operation and control called maximum signature lifetime, which is also be able to put into the structure. So the current use cases are all DNS records under different objects, which is pretty easy to design with that structure presented. So having the same structure under different objects unifies that structures, and that makes it pretty easy to use it. So another example. So this is an example of a potential version of DELEC records, which is just adjusted to the hackathon result, or I think the last draft of DELEC. Pretty easy to adopt. So we have the records where the DELEC type lives, the R data, which is basically an SVCP record with different things. The R data type is arbitrary, so it's easy to adopt, and we can put all that into an array of objects. So it's potentially more records per object. Now, having those guidelines, we can easily adapt new records into this without having the need for a specific for standardization. So experiments are able to be included in this and not getting diverse naming specifications between different registries. Yeah, so just a bit of a disclaimer. This draft is not final. It's just pointing out ideas how it could be look like. We not even have defined the requirements fully, so that should be weighted, and also the core structure of RPP should be defined first before we go into where this is living in the end. So this is just a structure for DNS records. Yeah, last but not least, we have a clean model, data model. We have a strong alignment to the DNS, where these records should go in eventually, and EPP use cases are already designed in it. Next steps for the draft are adding examples for key sets, which are used by Fred, and talk about IDNA support and a lot of more questions hanging. Thank you.
Jim Reid speaking for myself yet again. I think this is very nice and clean. Nicely done. Thank you. My question though is, why have you separated out the time to live element from the rest of the DNS data model? I think it'd be simple if there's just a single model that deals with all aspects of a DNS resource record that's being provisioned in the registry, rather than pulling out TTLs and making them distinct from the other stuff that's going on.
Oh yeah, TTL is kind of a special thing, of course. TTL can only live on a set of names of types. So it's not possible to define a TTL for just one record and having another one for the same name on another way. So it has to be.
Yeah, but if you take, for example, NS records just now, it's a default that's set by the domain name registry that decides what it's going to be for the delegation point, and then the child delegation then chooses the NS record time to lives beneath the zone cut. So I don't see why we should try to make a distinction between some other stuff that goes into the parent zone with what might be in the child, and I think we should just lump in the TTLs with that. Just my personal preference. I think just adding another little configuration hook just adds a little bit more complexity, and it doesn't seem to bias anything. But if you can give me a good reason why it should be, then obviously let's do it.
Okay, I know of some registries not even allowing that the TTL should be set. So yeah, I take this into consideration, I think.
Okay, so thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kristen. I've actually locked the queue because we are right at the very last end of our
Can I have
our
10
time.
seconds?
You can have 10 seconds,
Okay.
and then it has to go to the mailing list.
Suggestion for another thing to add to this is an example of how this would be used for setting C-sync records. So client notify the registrar and so the registry about changes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Christian. And thank you, everyone. Sorry, those who had comments that we didn't get time to talk about. I think it's been a very productive session. I'd like to thank everyone for their constructive submissions and feedback to everyone. Thank you also to our note takers. The notes have been excellent, I think. So it just leaves for me and Marco to thank you once again and look forward to seeing you all in Montreal. And that's the end of everything. You can go home now.
Or have a drink.
No. No, you don't have to go home. You can go home. It's a may, not a must. Thank you. Thank you.